I know we don't have very much time. It's a great turnout. Thanks for coming to hear me speak tonight. I'm Susan Dileno. I'm currently the Vice President of Enrollment Management at Ohio Wesleyan University. But Enrollment Management entails usually the overseeing of admissions and financial aid. Sometimes it'll go beyond that, and we'll be overseeing registrar and could be a broader role. But traditionally, the Office of Admission and Financial Aid go hand in hand because these are kind of critical factors, of course. We need to work very closely together and make sure that we're enrolling the right students at the right price, and making college affordable is certainly a big part of our mission and our responsibility as professionals. So this is my first year at Ohio Wesleyan. I started in admissions in 1987. So I have a lot of experience. My first job was at Case Western Reserve as Director of Undergraduate Admission. I was there for about 15 years. And then I traveled to a teeny tiny little place in upstate New York where I worked for about 5 years at traditional liberal arts college. I made my way back to Ohio. I'm a native Clevelander and spent 11 years as Vice President at Baldwin-Wallace University. And now, as I'm going around Ohio, making the circuit apparently, I'm at Ohio Wesleyan. And all have been great places. They're great ways to spend my time, and I strongly believe in each of their missions, although they're very different from each other. It's been a great road. So I'm going to speak to you, I guess, from a variety of perspectives, but what I want to share with you in the next 15 or 20 minutes, it's kind of an insider's look at the process. So what really happens behind the closed doors, what are we really looking at? And Kian touched on many of, in his little brief segue before we had to depart, the critical pieces of the application and what we spend most of our time looking at. By far, the most critical piece is going to be the academic pieces. So again, these are things that the student does actually have control over, and this would be his or her course selection. So we will definitely take a long look at what types of courses is the student signed up to and taking. And then how well is that student doing in those courses? So how are they performing? The GPA, we often get the GPA. Sometimes schools don't report GPA, which is always interesting to me once in a while, but for the most part, schools are reporting that. Class rank, more and more schools are not reporting class rank, we're finding. So we have to kind of make a judgment. How is that student performing in relation to their peers? And then the load or the strength of the curriculum. So are they in AP or honors or IB or college prep? Now the most common question we get in admissions is, what should my student take? Is it better to take AP course or the college prep or the honors? And do you have anybody have a child in College Credit Plus taking? Or College Credit Plus, that's another common one. So my general reaction to that is wherever your child is going to be most successful. So the College Credit Plus is great. Colleges around the state will accept those credits by and large. But you might, if your son or daughter is thinking about maybe an Ivy League school or more competitive school, it might be better to take the AP, because sometimes the schools will get a little picky about the college credit and where it's being offered and who's teaching it. So that might be a safer route. But by and large, the AP and IB and College Credit Plus programs are great because it gives your child a step in the right direction in terms of getting courses that are going to count towards graduation. And we all heard Kian say most students aren't graduating in 4 years. That's the reality. So if you can come in with credit, that's great. But the second great thing about it is that your child is going to be well prepared for college. I mean, those AP courses are college level courses. So if they can do well in those, that's, you want to steer your child towards those sorts of things. If they can be successful. I was thinking as I was driving from Columbus, when my son was in high school, he was not the most motivated kid, but I knew he was bright, but he just did like the bare minimum. And I knew he loved to write, and I really fought for him to be in AP English. And so he was in AP English, and he didn't do that well, and so I felt terrible as a parent until he got to college. And suddenly, my son wants to be an English major. So regardless, he wasn't that motivated to do the AP work, but the skills that he learned in that AP class really helped him, I think, find a love and the discipline for writing that then translated into his career at college. So it's a funny story. He didn't do so well, but kind of was a good thing at the end of the day for him anyway. In admissions, we are all assigned a territory. This is everywhere I've worked, and this is how it typically works. So each of our admission counselors are assigned a region, and then within that region, high school. So it is our job to know the high schools. By and large, we travel to each of these high schools over the course of the year. If we don't know the high school, we have a wealth of information that's available to us to learn about what courses are offered, what's the average ACT or SAT for that high school, how many go on to four-year colleges. They might give it grade distribution, so we see how the seniors are falling in the grade distribution or GPA. It will list the colleges that the student attends. So even if we're not physically in the high school, we have a lot of information that we at our disposal to get to know the high school, what's offered, and then in that context, what is your student doing to take advantage of the opportunities that are given to him or her in the context of the school that they attend. So we do know the schools, and if your son or daughter's at a competitive high school, I'm sure many of them are here. We know that, maybe there's no grade inflation, or to get an A, it's really difficult. So that's our job to know that. And then evaluative measures that we look at next are things like artistic talent or athletic ability. We will look at things like academic awards. And then certainly we spend a lot of time looking at the quality of the writing. So this would be demonstrated by the essay, of course. But the essay has two purposes. It's how well does the student write, so we're looking at grammar and punctuation and content. But probably more valuable is we're using the essay to get to know the student. It's the personality of the student that sort of shines through, right? That's really what we're trying to get at in the essay. So all of the non-academic things, we often get a lot of questions about this. First off, extracurriculars. So yes, we do look at extracurriculars. And I guess as I looked at my own children going through the high school process, it really always made me kind of sad. And to see students who would get involved in activities because they look good on their resume or their application. And you can tell there just really wasn't the passion, or they really weren't good at it, but it was just something that they were told to do. Hey, put this down, key club, whatever it is, just because that's what colleges want to see. And, more is not better. It's really the quality of the experiences, definitely over the quantity. And I really want to stress that. So we can kind of see through those things, especially if there's a lot of jumping around. Your child does one thing one year, and next year he's trying something else, and next year she's doing something else. So we're going to pay a lot of attention to that.
I'm sorry, how did you say?
I said quality over quantity.
Quality, okay.
Yeah.
That's right, okay.
So, if they do 2 or 3 things really well, that's better than going to be a laundry list of things that they're doing and maybe they're not progressing. So for us, what we're trying to assess in the extracurriculars is the character of the candidate, right? So we're getting personality glimpses by what they choose to do outside of the classroom. It does not matter to us what it is that they're doing. We're not judging, let's say, Boy Scouts is more valuable than working in, soup kitchen, or bowling is more value than playing golf. I mean, we don't make those judgments. But what it is that we're trying to assess is competence, the energy level, maybe a sense of adventure in the types of things that they're doing. Are they responsible? Are they leading up to leadership in those particular activities? Their character, their passion for an activity. So I'm going to tell you 3 things that I think you have to keep in mind when you're working with your children on whether or not to do an extracurricular. And the first is, this is what we're looking at. So you might want to write this down. whether time spent on an involvement has been growth-producing, productive, or meaningful. So what we're looking for is, have they made a difference in that activity? Have they completed or contributed to a worthwhile end or product? Have they learned something in that activity? Did they develop a skill or a talent? And did they reach a goal? So when I mentioned Boy Scouts, were they an Eagle Scout? So we want to see that progression and kind of that stick-to-itiveness, that's what I call it. The second thing in extracurriculars that we're looking for is how the leadership or initiative has been demonstrated over the course of the years that they've been involved. So did they found a club? Are they president of a club? Did they serve as a captain on an athletic team? Did they progress from maybe a regular member to something that would be more responsibility or more of a leadership position? Did they somehow change the nature of the club that they were involved in? Sometimes you read stories about students who maybe expanded the club by really working through the membership process, or how they marketed the club to bring in more students. So those are the things that we want to see. And did they go beyond the norm in terms of contribution to the group, team, or project, or are they just going through the motions? So try to read between the lines on that. And then thirdly is what kind of outside recognition have they received? So especially in sports, that's easy to see, right? When they get all sports trophies and recognition in newspapers and things like that. But even there are recognitions that can be given within the high school for certain clubs and activities that the students do. So we like to see that recognition as well. So how many sophomore parents do we have? And then freshman parents? And then the rest are juniors or seniors? Juniors, okay. So by the time I'd say they reach their, so freshman year, they're kind of getting a taste of what to get involved in. And then by sophomore year, I usually recommend that they begin to narrow it down. Like, what is it that you like to do? And then by junior year, by the time you hit that, they really should have a sense of settling down on what their favorite activities are. Senior year becomes very, very busy with the application process and visiting schools. So they really just should have those select few that they really love that they're sticking with by the time they reach the junior year or senior year. So other things that we look for, and these are things that are not in your control, because there is a randomness to college admission, right? So sometimes you see two students who look exactly alike. They're both in the top 5% of their class. They both have 4.0s. They both have 1,400 SATs. And these are things like geography. So schools, when you get to the point where you're really selecting a class, it's sort of like putting together an orchestra, right? So when you become more selective, you want a good distribution of students from around the country or around the world. So if we have too many students from Ohio, we might not give them an edge over somebody who is maybe coming from Hawaii, and because there's an educational value, or that's how we think, to have difference, right, in our classroom. So when students can be exposed to people from different cultures or parts of the country or parts of the world, that's usually a good thing. We will look at gender. Many, especially private, smaller liberal arts colleges, are not balanced. We have more females than we do males. This is kind of a nationwide problem. So sometimes a preference could be given to a male applicant over a female applicant, just to have gender balance in the class. We're also going to look for, or things that might make an impact is, we're going to pay attention, is it a first generation college student? Is there an alum or legacy connection? That's an advantage usually in college admission. Is there a staff connection? Is there some kind of hardship that's happened that we need to take account, an illness and maybe a drop in grades that we want to pay attention to? So all those things really you can't control, but those are things that we're going to read in the line, read between the lines, because we want to compose the best class for our institution. And those aren't things that you know or really will never know. Although sometimes in the admission process you can ask an admission counselor or your assigned admission counselor, and they might get into a little more detail about that. But But by and large, those things often can change every year too, especially with, you know, a good example is athletics. So sometimes the basketball team might be recruiting 5 new players because they've graduated a lot of seniors, and sometimes they're only looking for that one key player. You just never know. There's a randomness to it. We definitely take into consideration any family or extenuating circumstances. So if a student has, again, health problems or family problems, we want people to or students to maybe interview and explain what happened. Sometimes it's in a recommendation, sometimes it could be written about in an essay, but sometimes students don't feel comfortable having it in writing. So they may want to come to us and just kind of talk through what it was that hardship was that might have impacted their grades. Testing, standardized testing, I forgot to mention that earlier, that is important as well. But as Kian said, I wonder how, as we move forward, how much weight is being put on standardized testing. You know, there's a lot of anxiety over that. And there are now hundreds and hundreds of schools that don't require SAT or ACT scores. That fairtest.org is a great site, lists them all. Every year you see really some big name schools like Bates and Bowdoin and Wake Forest recently, and the list just keeps growing every year. So Ohio Wesleyan is test optional too. So a lot of great private liberal arts colleges, some publics, and some pretty large institutions now are test optional. So if your son or daughter does not test well, you know, not all is lost. You're not alone. Many others are in the same boat, and there are some schools that will just not take a look at it. And then finally, the interest in college, that is interest in the college that you're thinking about applying to. So we do pay attention to that. Did the student visit? Did they come on an individual visit, or did they interview, or did they come to a campus program? You know, now with technology, we track everything. We know if you've opened an email. If you don't open our emails, we know it. So all these little things, you know, because we want people who want us. You know, if we have so many spots available, we'd rather give it to a student who we know kind of has us on high on their list than one that's like, yeah, you know, you're my safety school, you're pretty far down, and usually you can tell by demonstrated interest in sorts of things that they're doing. So we do pay attention to that. Phone calls, everything. And then as a parent, the one thing I love as an admission counselor is I love it when the student actually calls and takes care of things themselves. It's really such a great thing. So I can't tell you how many times I get a call from a parent and it's like, hi Susan, we were filling out the application and we were wondering, and I'm like, no, it's not we. But it happens all the time, and it's easy to do because you're used to all these years kind of stepping in and trying to take care of things. But let them go. Let them, make their own phone calls, ask their own questions, let them fill out their own application. So it's a great process for them. It's their first big decision, and you'll see a lot of growth and maturity in your children as they go through this. So let them be. And then finally, I just want to share with you, because I want to humanize this process, so I know it seems random, and then we'll let you ask questions. Colleges don't reject applicants, they simply decline to admit them. And so what I mean by that is, in my 27 years of admission, I've had the good fortune of working with men and women that all take their job very, very seriously. And they're not only committed to the university, but they are very committed to each of the applicants that they're working with. They will be, as an admission counselor, your greatest advocate. That's their job. They want to advocate for your son or your daughter when they sit in an admission committee, especially if they've gotten to meet them, because we kind of feel passionate. We start to take it personal, right? We spend maybe a half hour with your child in an interview, or they just spark something in us that really makes us like them. We become their champion. So this is a personal relationship business, and I don't want you to forget that. It's not like some number crunching thing. I mean, we're really reading every application. It's very personal. But we took this job in the first place because we feel most at home in the academic environment, and we want you and your children to matriculate at a college where their individual strengths are recognized. And so again, it's very personal, and do take the time to get to know that admission counselor, because they're going to be a great advocate for you. And then finally, just I think if I had to leave you with one thought, have your child look out for number one, and that means doing well in school is important, and getting into college is great, but just keep in mind there's 4,000 colleges out there. And as Kian was talking about good fit, that really is the most important thing. And just to have your child, if they could find their passion, and if you find a school that can fulfill that passion and you could see them grow, then there's nothing better than that feeling. Regardless of name, brand, or whatever else that the student might be hung up on, they can really have a wonderful life at so many different colleges that are out there. And I hope for all of you that your children find a great fit and are happy and can blossom. So with that, we need to open it up for questions. That was
I have a question about after-school jobs, like how that fits into my son, got a job in an office setting, like before junior year, and then he gave up most of his school activities because he likes his job so much.
Yep.
And he just wanted to go to work after school.
That's great. And now,
it's good or bad? That's what I was worried about.
If he can convey how much he loves his job and what he's learned in his job, I mean, I've seen countless numbers of students, or this really strikes me as being great, when I've seen managers at buildings when they're 18 years old. I think that's fabulous. And that really demonstrates to me a lot of maturity, right? And they're supervising people that are older than them. That's pretty cool. So, and then there are times, and again, remember when I said we can't put judgment on their activities? Because there are students that have to work, and that's all they can do. They're supporting their family. And I've seen so many of those cases. They don't have transportation to do an extracurricular. They go home, they go to work, and the money that they bring in goes to the family. So again, we can't make those sorts of judgments. Again, if it's a learning opportunity for your child and work, that's fabulous.
I did the same thing.
Classes that are also extracurricular. So, for example, my daughter it takes up a lot of
I couldn't hear the question because the change
outside
of
of
classes.
school.
Oh, this is when classes are extracurriculars, and that we understand. We know, especially in the arts, if a student is very in tune to the arts, their time commitment to those things are extraordinary. So those are things that we are used to seeing, and we understand that they probably don't have a lot of time to do other things, especially if they're into music. Between practice and lessons and choir and all the other things they do, that's common.
What's it cost to apply these days to school?
It depends. So we're free. There's a lot of schools out there, especially things that we're on the Common App, that are free. You'd be surprised to find out how many there are. They can range 50, 75 or so. So it runs the.
The follow-up to that is ballpark is like different from PWLS, and the percentage of accepted children, 100 apply, there's 20 get accepted, and 5 ultimately come, at least ballpark.
Yeah, there's a lot of focus on the super selective schools, right? So like their Harvards and Yale, where they're admitting 5% and Stanford or 10%. The vast majority of schools are not in that selective pool. The vast majority of schools are admitting anywhere from 50 to 75% of their class.
If a student doesn't take the ACT and stuff, do they still have a chance at getting a scholarship?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I've worked at 3 places now that have been test optional, and they've all been awarding merit-based scholarship based on academics or an essay that they have. The criteria will change by school sometimes. You don't have to do anything else if you're test optional. Some schools will make you write an extra essay or send in a writing sample. I think it's NYU. I remember going through this process. They have a convoluted thing, like you have to submit subject tests instead of an SAT or ACT. They're all different, but you have to read. Just make sure you really are reading all the requirements if you do test optional.
To get to meet with
It'll depend on the school, but for many of us, especially the private liberal arts, we love to do that. And just call a lot of us will have our profile on the website. So, and it'll say, here's the counselor responsible for your region. So meet your admission counselor is out there, and then you can email us directly or give us a call. So, is that it? Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you.